how empires rewrote history to control the world and why it still matters today. History. We think of it as a collection of facts, an unchangeable record of the past. But what if history isn't as definitive as we believe? What if the stories we've heard about our past are incomplete, misleading, or deliberately altered? Who gets to decide what history says, and what happens when they use their power to get it wrong? Throughout human civilization, the manipulation of history has been one of the most effective ways for empires to solidify their power. Whether by erasing inconvenient truths, glorifying their rulers, or silencing opposing voices, history has often been bent into a tool for control. And this isn't just a problem of the distant past, it continues to shape the world today. In this video, we'll take you on a journey to uncover how rewritten history has shaped cultures, justified oppression, and helped maintain power across centuries. Most importantly, we'll discuss why understanding this manipulation is crucial for us as we navigate the complex narratives of the present. At first glance, history feels like a concrete, indisputable thing, a shared record of what truly happened. But in practice, history is much more fluid. Rewriting history happens when narratives are intentionally altered to serve a particular purpose, whether it's political, cultural, or personal. Importantly, this isn't the same as legitimate historical revisionism, a process by which historians re-examine the past with new evidence to create a fuller picture. The rewriting of history discussed here is far more intentional and dangerous. These manipulated accounts distort events to consolidate power, justify actions, or erase dissent. It's not just about what stories are told, but also about what is left out, which voices were silenced, which events were minimized or erased. When the winners write history, they get to control how they are remembered and how the vanquished are forgotten. Empires quickly learned that controlling the narrative of history was just as important as winning wars or expanding borders. Rewriting history served several key purposes. Legitimizing rule, empires could justify their authority by framing it as inevitable, divine, or destined. By selecting which events to highlight and which to ignore, they created narratives that painted rulers as heroes or even godlike figures chosen to guide their people. Erasing opposition, rewritten history was also used to wipe out enemies, rivals, or alternative perspectives. From removing names from inscriptions to erasing entire cultures from stories, this tactic ensured that opposing narratives were suppressed. Fostering unity. To hold together vast, diverse territories, empires constructed myths and shared histories that bonded people under a single national or imperial identity, often erasing minority voices in the process. Manipulating history wasn't just about shaping public perception in the short term. It was about building a legacy, a version of reality that would survive long after the empire itself disappeared. Let's step back in time and look at how ancient empires wielded the power of the pen and chisel to shape history. In ancient Rome, stories about emperors were carefully crafted to cement their power. Monuments, coins, and inscriptions showcase their military victories and divine favor, glossing over the bloodshed and political turmoil often required to claim the throne. Take Emperor Augustus, for example. He is celebrated as the leader who brought peace to a fractured Rome. But this so-called Pax Romana came at the cost of ruthless purges and a civil war, a narrative conveniently omitted in the imagery and texts that glorified him. One of Rome's most telling practices was damnatio memoriae, a method used to erase disgraced figures from history. The names and portraits of political rivals or unpopular leaders were removed from monuments and records as though they had never existed. What the empire wanted forgotten, it made sure was erased, an early example of rewriting the past to control public perception. This phenomenon wasn't confined to Rome. Ancient Egypt also engaged in the selective rewriting of its own past. Pharaohs who fell out of favor often had their names and achievements chiseled away from monuments. Successive rulers took credit for the same achievements, erasing the contributions of those who came before them. In both cases, history became a tool to solidify the authority of those in power while eliminating any trace of dissent. Fast forward to the age of colonial empires, where rewriting history became a global practice. During this period, imperial powers like Britain, France, and Spain didn't just manipulate their own stories, they shaped how entire civilizations were remembered. Take British colonial rule in India as an example. Imperial historians framed British conquest as a civilizing mission, casting the British Empire as the benevolent bringer of progress to a supposedly backward land. By selectively downplaying India's rich history of scientific, cultural, and economic achievements, British narratives justified their exploitation and control. Lost in this rewriting were centuries of Indian innovation erased to make the empire's version of history seem inevitable. Similarly, in Africa, European colonizers erased rich pre-colonial histories to portray the continent as uncivilized before their arrival. Empires like Mali, which were centers of trade and learning, were reduced to footnotes in favor of stories about European exploration and salvation. Monuments were destroyed, oral traditions were ignored, and colonial powers erected their own claim to significance. This erasure wasn't accidental. It was a calculated tool to justify domination and suppress resistance by diminishing these cultures' historical pride and autonomy. As time went on, rewriting history became even more strategic, particularly in the 20th century during the rise of propaganda-driven regimes. Entire governments were built around controlling historical narratives in real time. Nazi Germany is an infamous example. Hitler's government rewrote history to glorify the Aryan race while demonizing Jewish people and other minorities. School curricula, films, and public monuments rewrote the German past to align with Nazi ideology. This distorted history justified the Holocaust and other atrocities under the guise of protecting a fabricated national identity. In the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin perfected the art of erasing history. Political rivals didn't just vanish from photographs, they were erased altogether from history books and official documents. By carefully controlling education, media, and public life, Stalin created a version of Soviet history that erased crimes, glorified revolutions, and ensured his regime remained uncontested. The manipulation of history in these regimes wasn't about understanding the past, it was about manipulating the present to control the future. It's tempting to think rewriting history is a relic of the past, something confined to the empires and authoritarian regimes of another era. But it's not. In fact, the manipulation of history is just as prevalent today, only now it happens on digital platforms at an unprecedented speed. Governments and political parties continue to rewrite history to suit their agendas. Corporations distort their environmental or labor histories to present themselves as responsible, modern entities. The internet amplifies these distortions, spreading misinformation faster than ever before. A single tweet, a viral video, or a manipulated document can create entirely new and false records of events for millions of people worldwide. Take Holocaust denial as an example. Despite overwhelming evidence of the Holocaust, denialist narratives persist online, fueled by those who seek to bend history to their purpose. Similarly, debates over the portrayal of slavery in American education highlight the impact of manipulated historical narratives on current-day policies and racial dynamics. History distorted in the present becomes a weapon that shapes public opinion, policy, and perception. Discovering the truth about history has always been challenging. Not only do powerful groups erase or distort records, but the biases of even well-intentioned historians can color their work. Add to this the physical destruction of evidence, whether through war, natural disasters, or deliberate suppression, and it becomes clear that piecing together accurate histories is no small task. Fortunately, efforts to reclaim forgotten narratives are underway. Scholars are diving into oral histories to recover the lost stories of indigenous peoples. Communities are re-examining colonial accounts to reassert their own histories. And critically, public interest in understanding erasure, who was left out and why, has grown, sparking important conversations about historical balance. As individuals, we don't have to accept distorted versions of history as the only truth. Here's how we can take action. Educate yourself. Seek out diverse and reliable sources of history. Engage with voices from marginalized communities to understand whose perspectives may have been left out. Question the narrative. Ask critical questions. Why was this story told this way? Whose interest does it serve? What alternative perspectives exist? Engage in dialogue, support efforts to recover erased histories, and engage in difficult but necessary conversations about how history shapes identity and power today. History is far more than a record of the past. It's a tool that shapes how individuals, societies, and nations understand the present and imagine the future. The stories empires told weren't just self-serving in their time. They created legacies of distortion that continue to influence the world today. By understanding how and why history was rewritten, and by confronting those narratives with curiosity and care, we empower ourselves to uncover deeper truths about the past. And in doing so, we help pave the way for a future built on honesty and shared understanding. After all, while the victors may write history, the power to question it belongs to us all.